Virtus Verbis Podcast disclaimer. The information presented in this podcast is for entertainment, informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as legal, professional, or financial advice and should not be construed as such. Content and topics shown or discussed may not be accurate nor up-to-date information. Laws and regulations change frequently and vary by location, jurisdiction, and by nation. You should consult with a qualified legal or financial professional for advice specific to your situation. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. The views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast as a whole. The host is not responsible for any errors or omissions in the information provided or for any actions taken based on the content of this podcast. We are not liable for any losses, damages, or consequences arising from the use of this information. By listening to this podcast, you agree to hold the host and any guests harmless from any decisions you make, or from any losses, damages, or other claims arising from your use of this information.
All right, we're back. All right, let's continue that conversation. That was interesting. Yep, keep going.
So our topic is about how people see other Bitcoiners talk about Bitcoin, and how sometimes that could lead to a negative effect of when you try to share with your family and friends. Do they see you as promoting a cult or some type of religion or some type of belief that they probably look at you and be like, hey, are you going too far down the hole right now? Do we need to help you? Like, I definitely have gotten that experience talking to some of my friends that are not in Bitcoin, but that have heard of it and have told me that they definitely piqued their interest at the time, but they're too far along and they don't want to be involved anymore. And what I'm trying to find out right now is there a way to talk to people such as those that you don't want to come across too strong, but at the same time, you feel like if you don't talk about it at all, you're doing them, you're
A disservice.
You're not helping them. Yeah, disservice, exactly.
Like, yeah.
So that's my thing.
Fair enough. My approach, my personal approach, right, is I'm totally aware of that because as I was saying earlier, like it's so normal for human beings to be afraid, or not afraid, but weary of Ponzi's or scams, right? I mean, it's all through history, right? I was saying, snake oil salesman, someone's always trying to sell you something. When you go buy a used car, they'll always tell you everything's working, and then when you finally buy it, then you find out everything's broken. It's that same mentality, right? It's always like, the person that holds my bags is the loser. I'm the winner if I can get out of it fast enough, right? And that's why for myself, like I too, I don't like people coming and shilling stuff at me, like telling me, oh yeah, it's the best, you gotta do this. No, like for me, what works better for me is if someone told me, hey, look, there's this thing here. It's pretty interesting, whether you want to look at it as a technology or something that has potential to be more or can mean different things to different people. You should check it out, right? And so that's the start. And that's okay, because then at that point, they're just more like, oh, okay. They might ask you some questions and then they may stop. Or if they're more interested, they'll probably ask more questions and then maybe do a little bit of research. The whole point is that you'll hope they'll go and look at it themselves. There's no way of helping anyone. We both know, right? Like in life, if someone doesn't want you to help them, it don't matter what you offer. They're not going to take it because they don't want your help. But if there are people that are curious or they feel like there's something is not quite right, then they'll be more open to that. Now, another thing that I do is in part in lines with showing them how the technology works, because Bitcoin's all intangible, right? Until you actually interact with it. So what I do is I'll say, hey, if you're interested, go download this wallet, right? Whichever ones. I'll give them, I have to give them some recommendation because I don't want them downloading some wacky scam wallet either.
Exactly.
So usually it'll be ones maybe I've used before or tried out and go, hey, you can try any one of these, pick one. And they do. And I'll send them like a really tiny amount, right? We're talking like teeny tiny sats, right? Especially if it's on Lightning. And it's just to show them that, look, this is not like all hocus pocus. You downloaded an app off of the App Store or whatever store. And you now within a couple seconds, you have some sats showing up on your phone or whatever device. You can continue to believe it's not real. That's okay. But I've just shown you that it is tangible in that sense. You can question whether the technology is legit, and by all means do so, because if you question, that means you're at least wondering, is this real? But if you don't even care to question, then you're not going to bother doing anything further. right?
They're gonna
Mhm.
always come. I'm just
Go
trying to
ahead.
think about situations where my friends or the ones that are not into Bitcoin,
Sure.
have questions that come up,
Yeah.
and they're gonna question like, well, okay, great, like I have this in my wallet, right?
Hmm.
Um,
What do I do
you
with it?
know, yeah, what do I do with it? How am I gonna use it?
Yeah.
And that goes down. Sorry, excuse me. That goes down to like a whole different
Rabbit
conversation.
hole. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like, and obviously you want to tell them like, well, no, this is like for you to save. Like, at least this is my point of view, right? I'm like,
Hmm.
well, no, it's for you to save. This will still hold value for you, right? Like, it's as if you had real estate property or any other type of property that you want to make sure it's still worth the same down the road. So when
Hmm.
you do need it and you do need to spend it one day, it holds its value, right? Like that's what you want to tell them, and they're like, okay. And what I worry for them too is like they might just forget about it,
Oh, absolutely.
and
Yep.
right, like, oh, whatever, and then just kind of leave it, or oh, I lost my phone, or oh, I forgot my password to
That
the whatever
very
wallet
possible.
they
Yeah.
have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a concern as well.
Yeah. And again, for the listeners, right? Not financial advice. None of this is.
Of
But
course.
back to your point, like, and then that's the reason why I won't like shell out any big amounts. Not that I have that much to give, anyways. It's more so to bridge that knowledge gap, right?
Mhm.
First and foremost, it
Yeah,
is a technology, right? Therefore, it's
yeah,
grounded. There's literal science behind it, or at least math and programming. So it
yeah,
makes it real, tangible in that sense, right? I mean, if you're willing to use a browser and go surfing on the internet, what makes you think the stuff that you're finding on the internet is real? Maybe some
fair
of it
enough.
isn't, right? And that might
Yeah.
be true too. But there are things that
Mhm.
you can buy off the internet. So
Yeah.
to a degree, that person has to make a judgment call as to how real they think it is. And
Hmm.
again, back to my point, is the whole point is to incentivize them to go and study it, because there's no, I mean, they can ask for guidance or help with clarification on specific topics. But again, I'm only one person. I myself, I'm still going down the Bitcoin path, the journey.
Yeah.
I'm still learning, and that won't stop because Bitcoin is still evolving. So I can only
Yeah.
explain what I know, but there will be a point where I have to put up my hand and go, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. But if you can
That's
find
right.
the answer, please come and tell me, because I'd be interested in knowing, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. There is no master. There is no grandmaster. Then no one can know it all. There's so many different aspects of it, whether it's from a philosophical point, whether it's from a humanitarian aspect, from a coding
Mhm.
aspect, from a mathematical cryptography aspect. There's so many things. How can you know it all? It's just not possible.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
but
do,
mhm,
sorry, I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, I do like the fact that how you say it in terms of like, hey, if you can find something that's wrong with it, please tell me.
Yeah,
I
I
really
want to
want
know.
to know.
Yeah.
Like, because when I do ask that question, and this is, mind you, this is a few years ago,
Hmm.
so I haven't brought back up the subject yet
Sure.
because I sense some, not hostility, but you sense some like,
Mm,
hey, I don't want to talk about the subject anymore,
uneasiness.
because the answers I got from some other friends were like, well, that's like what criminals use, or hey, doesn't
Hmm.
that lead to like something bad, XYZ, or something like that? And then it's like, and you don't. It leads you away from actually talking about the topic. It
Yeah.
leads it back to the whole, what we consider, or what I consider, like, the media's bad portrayal of
Hmm.
Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so then it's like, okay, well, it automatically puts a bad taste in my mouth. It's like, I don't want to talk about this guy anymore. About this guy, because consider I'm trying to argue and defend each single
Exactly.
point he's bringing up. That's
Exactly.
been brought up a bazillion times,
Right.
and no, and it's sort of like, and I hate to say it, but it's sort of like checkmate, right? Because if you try to start defending each of those things, which there are lots of valid
Oh,
ways to defend those things,
yeah.
right? It just makes it into an
Argument.
argumentative
Yeah.
type of discussion, and not a
Yes.
constructive one.
Right.
And between friends, that's rough because you don't want to
Yeah.
go down that
Because you're
path,
friends.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's to some degree it's not worth it because you're not really there to once again, I don't want to use this word, but you're not trying to preach to them.
Yeah.
You're just trying to tell them, hey, you should keep an eye on this,
Yes.
and so be it. And the ones that are more critical thinking of it,
Hmm.
but not on the same side of the fence,
Sure.
they will start trying to throw up every single thing they've heard of, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, once again, just some resistances that I've experienced.
Yeah, it depends on whether the stuff that they're regurgitating from traditional media, whether that's like their defense to say I don't want to talk about this, or whether it's inquisitive, right? Like, well, no, wait, I heard it only criminals use this, or I read. And that's the funniest thing. Like, for me, whenever I hear people say, well, don't criminals use that, I'm thinking, absolutely. Why is it if a criminal uses it, it's bad? Like, if I was a criminal, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetically speaking here, if I was a criminal and I'm using it, that says to me it's working. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time using it, right? So to me, that's kind of weird where, yes, the media portrays, oh, only criminals use it. Sure, criminals do a lot of other things too. You got to remember, criminals are also human beings. They may not be doing things that you like or prefer, and definitely they may be doing things or are doing things that are against the law. But there is gray areas, right? We can call people who speed through red lights criminals too, because they're breaking the law. But of course, that's argumentative, right? Because we can say, well, that's running a red light versus, like, trafficking human beings. Well, we can argue that all day, because running a red light can cause to, the destruction of other human beings as well if they're caught in the T-bone or whatever. So to me, the argument of, oh, only criminals use this, I would argue if criminal enterprises didn't use it, I would be less likely to care about it, because that says to me that if even the unsavory people in society are unwilling to use it, that means it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. Bottom line. But, right. Like, that's how I see it.
I know exactly, and that's a very good argument, and I wish you were there when I was talking to them about it as well too. But I also know, on a different note as well too. I think well, related, right? Is that people kind of identify themselves by association, right? So for example, some people would like to buy brand name clothes. They feeling that if they wore it, they will be like Mr. Elite. Or Mrs. or Miss whatever status, know, and I think that type of thing goes both ways.
Absolutely.
If they heard good things about it, they would be, and also again, this is not something you should do anyways. Be like, hey, I have Bitcoin. Tell the world, hey, if Bitcoin was a very popular and sought after thing, you would bet your bottom dollar there will be a lot of guys out there flaunting, and there are people already doing that, right? The ones that have made it, influencers or whatnot that have made it, they do that, which is
silly,
crazy.
I wouldn't. That's crazy.
And so it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, the way I see it is like, you get these people that are like, they're into it, they're flaunting it. No, that's not where you want to go. And then there's the people that are like, oh, criminals use it, I don't want to touch that stuff. It makes me think that people think I'm a criminal, and that's the problem. When they see it themselves as such, they'll see it as other people that do use it are criminals. And maybe I can bring up this argument. I can ask them, am I a criminal? Because I like it and I have it.
Well,
right?
Here's the funniest. Well, here's the funniest thing, and the hugest comeback is, it turns out, with studies done and all that, right?
Yeah.
The criminals actually prefer to use fiat, like US dollars primarily.
Oh, I know.
Because it's untraceable, right? Like, Bitcoin is actually traceable, folks. Right? Like, on the blockchain, if you know the address of whoever sent something, you can trace their transaction to the end of history or to the beginning of time.
That's right.
Like, they can't get away, and that's why there's all those companies these days that say they do like blockchain CSI stuff, right? Where they punch it in. Once they know where the source is, they can trace it to wherever that person is, or that criminal is spending it. So it's not a very smart move. Whereas if it's like US dollars, you can't tell where that dollar bill's been. I can tell you how many times I've seen a dollar bill go somewhere where I wish I never saw that, because it's very disgusting and very unclean.
Money's dirty.
Oh, money's super dirty, right? And it's known, it's in newspapers and everything, traditional media, that every dollar bill has a very small trace amount of cocaine on it.
Yeah.
Right. So you telling me criminals aren't using fiat? They're using US dollars big time. That's the easiest thing.
Not just cocaine. I think excrement and everything else too. There's a bit of everything on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been everywhere. Dirty,
what's more unsavory? Like, a bunch of dirty paper money that's really been used for crime, where you have no way to track history other than you think it looks clean, therefore it must be a clean bill. No, I'm sorry, but Bitcoin is only pseudo anonymous, right? You can be traced, and that's why keeping your identity or your online transactions private is paramount, because anyone that knows, especially for folks these days, if you're doing it legitimately, or well, I shouldn't say legitimately, but I guess more in the retail space where you're going to an exchange and you're buying, spot Bitcoin from there versus meeting, I guess, a Bitcoiner and doing a trade privately. That's very different, right? Because when you go to an exchange, that company has been mandated by the government to hand over all customer information. Maybe not right away, but if there ever comes like time where they press them with legal lawsuits, that company will have to comply. They have no other option. So, at some point or another, eventually someone's going to find out that so-and-so, Joe Smith bought Bitcoin at an exchange. This is where they live. And these transactions are all, Joe Smith's. They can then track all the history of what was used for it and where
That's
it
right.
went.
And,
Right.
and that's why a lot of the exchanges for any type of crypto has KYC, right? Like know your customer, know your
Right.
client, because of the whole situation where they want to track these things and
Absolutely.
prevents. I mean, I don't know who's to say if they're really trying to protect the people, right?
Yeah.
But whatever, they're collecting information. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And however they use it, they'll see fit, and
Mhm.
our governments will see fit. Regardless of whether or not we agree with it or not. That's a whole other topic.
Yes.
But yeah, the whole thing is right now is just like those are the things that I see making me resistance in talking to more people about it.
Tell
Right?
me the story about, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
your friend, and how they missed the boat, if you don't mind sharing that on, or we don't have to if you want
Yeah.
to skip it.
So I was sitting down with a friend recently, and he's uh very very into tech. Knows quite a bit about um current events, both economy. He has a good take in economy, and
Mm, mm,
bright guy. Just knows a lot of stuff in general, right?
right.
And so I thought that would be the perfect opportunity, and he would be one of, I would thought, that be most receptive in talking about
Hmm.
Bitcoin, just as a general conversation.
Sure.
And so the topic went so much something like, oh, so how your so once again, I talk to, not financial advice, but I talk to a lot of
Hmm.
my friends about financial stuff, because I feel
Sure.
like it shouldn't be hidden. It's nothing to be ashamed of. In different cultures, people don't talk about money, and I really hate that, because I
Hmm.
feel like knowledge shared is knowledge gained, and
Yes.
this goes with any type of thing. I mean, we want to learn from each other's mistakes. I don't think mistakes should be shied upon as well either.
Absolutely.
So that's why when I sat down with him, and it was just general kind of conversation, I was like, "Hey, I go, so how much of your portfolio do you have in?" And I said crypto, because I don't even know. Some people do a lot of weird stuff, right?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
didn't say Bitcoin. I just said crypto in general. He's
Yeah.
like none. I go, oh, well, that's really surprising. I would have thought,
But
he would at
dabble.
least be gambling or dabbling
Oh,
in
I see.
some random coin, right?
Right.
And he's like, no. He goes, that's. He goes, not interested. I go, oh, really? I go, why? You gotta be at least wanting to think about holding a little, right? And he's like, nope, nope, missed the boat on it already. I go, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I used to have this friend that had been telling me day in and day out back when Bitcoin was, it's still mineable at home, like
Hmm.
uh, early days, very, very early days.
Hmm. Sure.
And he would say, like, his friend kept telling him, like, you should get into this, man. You should get into this. And so this is now the friend of a friend, right? That friend that was really into it.
Hmm.
He spent every savings he had, while living at home, putting it into Bitcoin, right?
Wow.
And afterwards, he's not around anymore. As in, like, he moved on to bigger and brighter things. And
Sure.
my friend has not had a chance to catch up with him anymore. I guess because they just are in
Sure.
really. It's hard, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, if he moved away and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and or whatnot, it's hard to keep touch. And he's at this point in time, he still tells me, I can see it in his eyes. He's like, "Oh, I really missed that boat. I really
Hmm.
wish I did it." And I ask him, I go, "Well, what's stopping you to do it right now?" I go, "It's not too late." But like, I have to be careful here,
Sure.
because I had to care about, first of all, he feels he has missed hit the boat, right?
Right.
And to some, that is a big you don't want to bring it back up and tell people like otherwise, even though it's
Sure.
positive, even though you're like, hey, you didn't, right? It's a good thing you're still thinking about it. You should go for it now. You don't want to go there because you sense that they felt it is, and they've
Mm.
already determined that they have,
Like
right? So
they're
coming down from that
wincing.
is already difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then secondly, it's like, what do I tell him? I mean, like it, it's I don't know. It's just one of those situations where like, okay, I should just exit this topic because it's gonna make him uncomfortable,
Sure.
and if I make him uncomfortable, it's gonna probably make the whole hanging out together not a very pleasant experience.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess if, like in hindsight, obviously, if I was in that conversation, I'd probably like usual pivot to inflation and focus more on that, right? Um, but it's different, right? I think I guess you and your friend were talking more about portfolio allocations, that kind of thing, just to kind of get a feel for where the interest was or wasn't. And yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's tough,
yeah.
especially if he or his friend was very into it and he never
Like,
really.
I mean, like
Yeah,
that's the extreme, right?
yeah.
I mean, not extreme. I mean, extreme for back then. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, there's this guy basically telling you, "Hey, man, just whatever you do, just get some," right? Because it's
Right.
much earlier day. Like, and who's to say we're not in earlier days right now too?
Oh,
That
absolutely.
and so that's the thing. Like, he didn't do it then. He's not doing it now. Is he
Well,
gonna do it in the future? I don't know, right?
sometimes
Like,
there's that. I don't know if it's a meme or not, but there's definitely a meme. The meme is the one where there's a hand in the ocean of water, and they're asking for help.
yeah,
Or oh, no, maybe it might not be the right meme, but the point is, um, people sometimes have to really step back and say, how many times have they encountered this Bitcoin topic? And again, a friend brought it up and they
yeah,
said no. And at some point, it could be 3 times or more, right? Um,
yeah,
where they finally like, you know what? I keep hearing of friends bring this up. I guess I
right.
need to look into this. And they have to make that own decision, I suppose. And I'm guessing that's potentially what will happen because, for myself, like, yeah, sure. When Bitcoin first came out, I read the white paper, right? And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool, but
Yeah,
I'm not that great at math, so I'm okay. That sounds kind of neat. I kind of get the idea, but I really don't really know much more about it, so I kind of tossed it
sure.
aside. Then the second
Yeah,
time, I encountered it was like on a YouTube video, like maybe like I don't know, back when at some point I think Bitcoin was hit a top of all time high of 20K. I'm pretty sure we could look it back
yeah.
up, but and
Mhm.
the YouTuber content creator was saying how they were so happy that they got out just in time and they sold the top, and right
Yeah.
after Bitcoin dropped to like whatever, like half the amount or something. And I'm kind of like, and then when you see those kind of videos, it just kind of reaffirms, yeah, Bitcoin, that's total Ponzi, right? But what didn't dawn on
Yeah.
me was that was already been like a whole bunch of years later, right? And I guess
Right.
what from what I recall when I watched that video, I was like, what? Bitcoin's still around? But then I still didn't have any incentive to look into it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty neat. Oh, maybe there's something there. And I parked it, right? I parked it again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's on me.
Mhm.
And then only
Mhm.
until, before the pandemic stuff, or, actually right after the pandemic stuff started, that's when again a friend said, hey, have you seen the price of Bitcoin? I'm like, what? Like, this friend almost never talks about like money
Yeah.
stuff, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
why is he talking about that? So then I went to go look it up, and then that's how it started. So that's why I'm saying, to my point is it may take three or more times depending
It
on
does.
mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. You're totally right. Sometimes different things trigger different people to
Hmm.
to act on it, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where I'm still learning in terms of like
Sure.
what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin does, and you know, and I'm also still learning about how to talk to people about this topic, right? It's funny, like there's just some people that we know, right,
Hmm.
that are into it but are very quiet about it,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you're kind of surprised, and sometimes I want to sit down and ask them why, but maybe they've been through this as well too. They know that one of two things: they
Hmm.
should just keep their mouth shut
Sure.
because it's safety reasons.
Sounds
right?
weird. Yeah.
Right. Well, no, it's because of their own safety. If they have a lot
that-
of
that
it, there's
too.
no reason
That
for them
too.
to spread it.
Mhm.
And second of all, they've been through situations where other friends are not so into it, and they feel like I don't want to sour the party at all. Right? Let's not talk about this.
That's true.
So I know I think you know who I'm talking about. But
Absolutely.
anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why it's like that's why it's like you that's why it's easy for me to understand why people don't talk about it more. You
But
know what I mean?
yes, but here's the funny thing. Besides,
Yeah.
that common person that we know of, I also know of another person where very similar situation where they told me that yeah, they know they've been into Bitcoin for a while, way earlier than myself.
Yeah.
And they basically said that, oh yeah, I sold it and bought my house. And I'm like, whoa. Oh, like that's awesome. Like that's great. Congratulations, right? I mean,
We're talking about the same person. We're talking about the same person.
no,
Yeah.
that's my point.
No?
Not the same person.
Oh, not the same
Not the
person.
same, but the
Oh.
same
Oh,
type of
okay.
story. That's what I find
Oh.
interesting, right?
Oh,
And
okay,
it's like,
okay. Yeah.
so here's the thing, like, because you
Yeah.
know me, like, I don't try to orange pill people um hard or anything like that, but I will try to share some thoughts or at least let them know that, hey, I'm studying this, feel free if you have questions, ask me. And the funniest thing
Yeah.
was this person um knew about it, and they've known me for at least a few years now, and we
Yeah.
meet regularly, I would say. And the thing is, they never once talked about being or knowing anything about it, or even saying that they looked into it before.
Wait,
But
do I know this person?
no,
I'm
no,
just
you do
curious.
not. That's the thing.
I
You
do
do
not. Oh,
not.
okay,
You
okay,
do
okay.
not.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and this person, I guess, is more quieter person. I mean, like likes to keep to themselves. So that's probably part
Of
of the
course.
reason. Like, don't want to
Yeah.
announce to the world. Who cares, right? I did my own
Yeah.
thing. Great. Well, like, but it just surprised me because I was again doing the usual, like, hey, let me send you some, right? Like, just for fun, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when they kind of disclosed to me, like, well, yeah, no, I know about it. Like, I've been there, done that, bought a house, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, as I said, I was like,
So
wow,
they're not into it anymore. Like
that's the
that was the
weird
end of
thing.
it.
You would think that
Yeah.
after you bought a house, maybe they're. But the thing is, like, if, or at least I don't know if they bought out the whole house, or maybe what they
They
meant was
use
they
a
put
portion
down,
of it.
down a big down payment,
Right.
and so maybe they don't have any
Yeah.
spare money to buy more, right? And so I did
Mm.
kind of broach the question a little bit. I was like, oh well, I mean, since you won, like, you made out with it. Not to say that you have to run away to or exchange it back to fiat to win, but to
Yeah.
some degree, for folks that are saving in Bitcoin, the concept is you save long enough. At some point, you do plan to spend it, whether or not Bitcoin is ready to be used as a currency by itself, as a unit, a unit of exchange, or directly, right? I'm hoping
Yeah.
that is sooner than later. There's a lot of that going
Yeah.
on anyways, but to a lot of folks that have been earlier doing the saving in Bitcoin, their expectation is when they need to, they'll exchange it back to fiat to enjoy it
Yeah.
or to use it for their purpose, right? And so to
Mhm.
hear about someone that was earlier than myself and doing that path and then using it to buy something that they need for themselves, but at the same time they don't really show much of an interest in it anymore. It
Yeah.
kind of surprises me because I would think
That's
that
really
if
weird.
anything
Yeah,
would
that's
cement that
but that
concept.
means
Right.
wait.
Mhm.
Doesn't that mean that that guy was just in it for the gamble then? Because if
I-
he doesn't have it anymore, he
Well,
he got in, got out.
sure,
Then
but
he didn't even understand. He didn't even understand
Mhm.
what the reason of having it to begin with was. Then
maybe,
it
but
was yeah,
my counter would be he can still see what the price is at right now,
sure, of course.
and it's
Yeah.
definitely gone up from since he bought his place. So
Yeah.
to some degree, your logic's critical thinking's got to kick in for that person to go, you know what? Wow, it still went up. And they could be thinking a couple things, maybe I shouldn't have bought a house. But hey, if you need a house, you need a house. I don't care, right?
Yeah.
I think
That
that's a
comes
win.
first.
To me, that's a win.
Yeah.
And these days, a lot of people can't even afford a house. So
Yeah.
great, right? But
Mhm.
for them to just not really show much interest or attention to it, after
Well,
they've.
I can actually explain this.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'll try.
Sure.
I think he too has missed the boat. I think he has that same
That
feeling.
feeling,
Yeah,
maybe.
because he sold too early.
Yeah, it's so much, maybe
And
enough to down payment, right?
now if he gets in, it's a double shot in the foot because it's like I was already there.
Yeah,
I
it
did it.
feels.
I got out, and now I gotta pay double to get back in.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow, man. That's harder than asking someone to start fresh right now.
Yeah, especially if you
To have
sold it
someone,
all. If you sold it
yeah,
all, that would be hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how do you okay? Because to some degree, when and I don't mean you understand this. When
I
we
know.
invest, it's emotional, right? Everybody's
Sure.
emotional.
Yeah.
Although we're told to leave the emotion outside the door, right? And we try to do that, right? But
Sure.
we get emotional. We're human beings,
Yeah.
and to that point, these guys are too,
Yeah.
right? They're gonna feel all the emotions,
Sure.
right? All the like, all regret,
Yeah.
all the anguish,
Hmm.
all the happy and the sad, right? You
That's
know,
true.
and so I think I can shed some light on this guy and say that he's probably feeling the same thing as my friend is, the one that didn't buy,
Hmm.
but maybe even
Maybe.
worse,
Yeah.
right? He's like, man, what?
What if I? What if I did it
You're right. Why did
differently?
I buy a house?
Or what if I
Right?
bought later? Right. That might be a
Yeah. What
thought
about
too.
later?
I would have needed
Right?
less. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
brutal. It is brutal.
So that's another barrier to re-entry in this case. Now, granted, there's not too many of these guys around. I feel like,
Well,
right?
I find it surprising that I met two in so far, right?
That's true. That's
And
true.
it's one of those
Yeah.
like they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it may
Well,
be to your point. Maybe that's the reason.
my
Hmm.
guy, he does want to. It's just whether or not it's a
Oh,
topic that it's good for the masses. If you sat him down, like he's still into it. He hasn't stopped, right?
yeah.
For the guy that we mutually know, the
Sure.
one that also sold coins and bought a house,
Sure.
like he's still in it, you know, and
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
great, you
Yeah.
know, and but the thing is, he never sold all of it though, right? That's my feeling is,
Well, it's
you
good for him.
know,
Good for him.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
and
beautiful.
and and but I mean that's something we can ask him more later. I really don't know the exact details. Like it's
Sure.
also one of those things. Like I get a sense that like you don't want to ask too deeply on people's finances
Yeah,
out
it
of
is
respect,
personal, right? We're talking about
right?
money here. It's not like we go around
Yeah,
asking people, "Hey, how much money do you have in your savings account?" Like, what?
exactly,
Like, why are you
exactly.
asking me that question?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very. I don't want to tell you my finances. Like, what?
yeah.
But that's yeah.
It's tough.
That's where it is weird, right? Like that Bitcoin wanting to talk about it, but then also understanding that there should be a certain level of privacy that you should not be telling people how many Bitcoins you have or don't have.
Yeah,
You just
just to be safe, right?
yeah.
You don't. It's one of those things where there is a lot of crime involved with it.
Hmm.
Not saying that it's being used for criminal activities, but people see it as the easy way of
Easy hit.
getting
Yeah.
value out of somebody,
Yeah.
right? It's hard to steal a house, right?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
easier to steal a car, right? And
Yep.
it's maybe easier to steal someone's Bitcoin if you know where it is and if you have the password to it,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just one of those things where like you might not have as much as you think you have now, but
Yeah.
it's still worth a lot to someone else that
Oh,
doesn't
sure.
have any, or that's
Nothing to
make
lose,
that has
right?
mischievous
Yeah.
thoughts
Intent.
or
$5
you know
wrench.
just exactly
Lots of
So
time on
I
their
do
hands.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, let's circle back a little bit.
Okay. Sure.
I know you've mentioned before you know a lot of friends that are very financially sound, like as in knowledgeable, right?
Yes. 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 Yes.
I recall you have some stories about like you asking them about Bitcoin, I guess in the early days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back in, I remember this quite clearly because I don't bring it up with this person much anyways because
Sure.
it's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Very smart guy. Very well in tune with investing.
Mm.
Well above, well beyond his age
Hmm.
that he know all this stuff, but he does. He studies stock markets. He studies, and just mind you, he's not a financial he doesn't work in the financial markets,
Okay.
okay? It's not his job, but people have a passion, right? So
Hmm.
he studies investing, he studies basically saving money, let's put
Sure.
it that way, right?
Yeah.
And so he's a very sound person to go and ask for advice. So when I first looked at Bitcoin, or when Bitcoin first floated across my table, it was around $5,000 per coin, which
Okay.
is back in, I think, around 2017 or 2016. I can't remember
Sure.
exactly when. So sitting there at a party, just kind of hang out, and I ask him, I go, "Hey, have you what are your thoughts about this
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin thing?" And he's like, "Don't touch it. Not worth your time." Right?
Mm.
And then I'm like, "Oh," I go, "Really? Not even like look into it a little bit more?" He goes, "Nope, just don't." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's pretty hard no, right?" And
Yeah.
then and then
Very
and then so
confident
I'm like,
too. Very
yeah,
very
so that
assured.
that's what I sort of left it, because then
Mm-hmm.
someone I trusted and had lots of knowledge in investing is
Mm-hmm.
telling me don't touch it,
Yeah.
right? He told me stuff like the usual, which is very sound advice, buy the S&P 500,
Right.
which is fine, which is, look, there's nothing wrong with
Nothing
that as
wrong
far
with
as
that.
I can tell too.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
Once
wrong
again,
with it.
not financial advice,
Yes, not bad.
but who doesn't matter. That to me that made sense, right? To a
Yeah.
certain degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So so then, so then, yeah, some time has passed, and then we looked at it, and sorry, I just lost my chain of thought here. Yeah, and we looked at it, and then things just kind of like went away, and I didn't really get back into it until we started talking about it overall,
Sure.
right?
I'm
Yeah.
assuming you haven't gone back to that friend from the party to ask them of their opinion of Bitcoin recently or of late.
No, no, I haven't. We don't have a chance to really sit down that
Mm,
often,
mm-hmm.
anyways. So it that in itself already is
Hard. Yeah.
hard. And then once we do sit down, it's not a topic that we would bring up
Absolutely. But
readily,
if it was under
Yeah.
like similar circumstances at a party lounging, would you be interested in getting their opinion on it again?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great to kind of talk about that. I always think that these topics are worth revisiting and
Hmm.
seeing what they thought now, and what's changed, what if anything has changed their mind, or maybe they're going to start saying things like, "Oh, it's still like, criminals use it only," or something like that, right?
Sure.
And I'll be, "Oh, okay, right." I don't press them hard
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
but I would definitely revisit the topic if it had a chance to. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
definitely.
think it's a good gauge, right? Because we want to know, like, because a lot of people, especially the ones that are like, oh, missed the boat, and they're so sure that they missed the boat. I think one way
Yeah.
I like to approach things is to ask people what their thought of Bitcoin is, because that's sentimentality. It's a very small
Mhm.
survey though, because it's always going to be people that I interact or maybe know of or meet up once in a while. Could be friends, family, or whatever. But the ability to at least bring that up as a question, go, hey, what's your thoughts on it now? Just to see if anything
Mhm.
changed in terms of like, is the information that they're getting or that they're looking at, has that changed? Because we know for a fact that traditional finance, we got Larry Fink, promoting Bitcoin like crazy, like the biggest mascot ever. Then you also got
Yeah.
Michael Saylor, GigaChat, and then he's promoting that stuff big time for corporations, right?
Yep.
At some point, we already know that stuff's floating into mainstream media, whether it's the MSNBCs or whatever talk shows or whatever.
Mhm.
Our regular friends and families are gonna eventually see that stuff because Google will push it to them one way or another, right?
Yeah.
And they'll see it, and I kind of see it as a signal, right? Like if my normie friends all of a sudden start asking more about it, that to me says, well, I think what's been said before is, oh,
I'm gonna sell.
yeah, exactly, right. Bull
Yeah.
market's over because people are actually interested in it again.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I,
yeah,
I I totally agree. I think it's cycles, right? It comes back again, and
hard
people
not to
will
be.
will be it will pick back up no matter what. I mean, we are kind of in a situation right now. I don't know if it's a black swan event or not, but there's a lot of things that are kind of like
Mhm.
seems like artificially holding it down,
Sure. Yeah.
and so that makes me feel like, oh, there may be something uh different in this
Different.
this market
Yeah.
cycle than we would
Yeah.
normally be thinking about.
Sure.
Uh, and so, yeah, so definitely just something to keep an eye out on. But to me right now, it's just like, you know what? I don't care if it moves up or down.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Hmm.
It's I'm kind of used to it in a sense. Um,
It's funny,
you
yeah.
know, um, and I'm just continue to do what I want to do, and either
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
DCA or not,
Yeah.
or just hold, like, and like my outlook on it is, and this is what I not what I believe, but what I want to see, I guess, is one day we don't, and we talked about this before, of course.
Hmm.
One day we don't need to touch it at all.
Yeah.
One day we lend we use it as collateral,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we borrow
Borrow
against it,
Yeah.
because
I
because
agree.
that's what rich people do. They
Hmm.
don't sell their shares
No,
in XYZ stock. They
exactly.
put it up for leverage,
Yep.
right? Because why? If I sell the stock, I get taxed,
Exactly.
right? But
Exactly.
if I lend it for leverage, well, now I can borrow from it and I can write it off, right? Now,
Yes.
once again, not financial
Not
advice,
financial
okay?
advice, but that's what
Not
rich people
financial
do.
advice whatsoever. I must emphasize that.
Elon Musk does it too.
Exactly,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
all the
And
rich people do it. That's how they get
yeah,
around not being taxed to death.
yep.
But yeah,
And in all honesty, I don't
mhm.
think right now it's far from it, because since there's ETF for Bitcoin,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, I don't see why banks won't take that into
Oh, they want
collateral,
to. They want to.
right?
Yeah.
I don't see why they can't. I mean, they should be able to.
It's just an asset, but regulations and stuff, they have to get through that hurdle. But you know about the fact
Yeah,
that the options for ETFs are coming out, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Heard about
yeah,
that. Heard about that.
so
Yeah,
that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be more, paper Bitcoin related stuff,
I know.
right? But
Yeah,
here's the
yeah.
thing, right? Like to your point earlier, is like this is literally the first year spot Bitcoin ETF is out. So I agree with you. Like I don't know if necessarily it's a black swan event, but it's definitely a very different thing from any other prior cycles, like 4 year
Yeah.
cycles, because there never has been this level of institutional buying, right? This is the first
Hmm.
time. I can only imagine after when we get to the next halving, after a full cycle of institution presence,
Hmm.
what that says to the rest of the world, right?
Right.
If we end up on the other end of it 4 years later, and the ETFs are still strong and even stronger potentially,
Hmm.
I would say that opens the floodgates to even more potential, economic wealth flooding towards Bitcoin. Again, not financial advice. This is me speculating.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah, of course.
if you were to ask me, do I think Bitcoin's going to go to zero now, or if it's going to go up higher?
Yeah,
I find it very hard to think that it would go to zero. Not to say that it won't,
yeah.
but like, hey, if you've got all these institutions and banks just dying to get their hands on it, but they're only held back by legislation or
Hmm.
policy, you can only imagine what will happen once that's lifted,
That's right.
right?
That's
And
right.
even if
Yeah,
it's not lifted in America, it's going to
yeah,
be potentially lifted somewhere else in a different country. I mean, even if you want to discount El Salvador, right?
yeah.
Um, there will be other countries that will step up and go, you know what? Why not? I don't see a problem with this. Let's see what
Hmm.
happens, right?
Right,
One thing
right.
leads to another. So it's going to be very entertaining, I would say, at least, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what the price is. And you're right. To your point again, once you've been through down the rabbit hole and studying, and really that fortifies the understanding, and being through at least one full cycle, your
Mhm.
perspective changes. Here's some weird stuff, right? For one thing,
Yeah.
sometimes I think Bitcoin teaches people to be, or at least the ones that continue to hodl, right? To be
Yeah.
extremely patient, or maybe overly patient. Because
Hmm.
folks that can survive a whole cycle, they most likely have seen -60 to -80% drops.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
not get phased by that, like, hey, we're all
Hmm.
human, right? Obviously, when it drops, we're all like in a down mood. But to
Yeah.
continue to hold and I mentioned before, some continue to buy. What kind of
Hmm.
mindset is that? That's like monster mode, right? And
Yeah.
not many people can do that, because already you're in the red, negative. And
Yeah.
what exactly is making you buy more? Like, if
Yeah.
anything, just leave me alone, let me hodl, and let's hope it goes back up. That's probably most retail. And then once
Right.
it hits the price that they buy it at, they go, "Oh, I got time to sell. I got to get out of this before it goes down more." And
Yeah.
then it just
Yeah.
goes up further. So it's kind of weird, right? Where it rewards people to be extremely patient,
Yeah.
extreme diamond hands. And honestly, if that type of mentality was applied to stocks, it would not end well.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. There's a lot of situations where people keep holding, like for example, like what Enron back then, or
Hmm.
like or there even more recent events. There
Sure.
must be. I can't think off the top of my head, but there are
There's
many
tons.
situations where
Yeah.
people don't sell it in time, and that's why it's such a. It's not a science. It's not a exact science,
No.
right? There are things where people say like obviously that they've so called had their own experience put
Yes.
in, saying that, oh well, I did this and it worked for me. Yeah, but were you lucky,
Exactly.
or did you really know what you're doing? Because they've always said there's no hedge fund company out there that has been successfully right for a certain amount of times. I can't remember what the
Hmm.
record was or whatever,
Right.
but it's not many.
Yes.
Like there's very few people that actually that can have made money for their clients
Yeah.
by proactively buying and selling and trading. The
Absolutely.
only the only thing that if we've heard through our friends as well too is the ones that are in the financial sector. Once again, not financial advice though,
Hmm.
is that you buy the S&P 500 and you just leave it
Exactly.
at that, right?
Yep.
Because that's tried and true.
Yes.
Everything else you're gambling, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I would argue even S&P 500 is probably gambling too. That's why it's not
Oh,
financial advice,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
They're banking on the fact that the those 500 companies are gonna stay around, or that if one or two of them flop, then you're fine because you still got
Hmm.
498 of them to back
Mixed
you up.
basket.
The
Yeah.
problem is that S&P 500 is based on the United States,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, yeah, we all better hope and pray they for one reason or another they're stable enough to continue to keep their
Hmm.
money and everything intact, markets and everything like that. Otherwise, yeah, if it did go to hell, then yes, it would be a big problem all over the world, right?
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it wouldn't. It's, I mean, there's a possibility there, right?
Yeah.
It's just hopefully it's a low one, right? For a lot of people's sake.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, and I've said it before too. The way I see the S&P 500. I mean, you're right. Like, there's the saying that a lot of the hedge funds don't do better than S&P 500.
Yeah,
So very
yeah,
few do, right? And
yeah,
even then, like S&P 500, we have to remind ourselves that whenever the government prints money and the people that are closest to the money printer, when they get that extra money, what are they going to
yeah,
do with it, right? Where are you going to stick it?
yeah.
Well, you're going to buy assets, right? Well, what's
Hmm.
the easiest asset to buy that has been known to go up? Oh, well, S&P 500. Well, why? Because
Yeah,
Magnificent
yeah,
Seven. And that's the
yeah.
wacky thing. That's what Michael Saylor says all the time is out of the 500 companies, it's only seven
Oh yeah,
companies that make the most
there's only
profit.
seven hold it up. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
So what
So
is up with that?
that's also risky. That's also risky too because it's by market cap, right?
I
They
know.
have the biggest market cap.
Yeah.
So in theory, you can't deny those players because those players
No.
are the ones that are making every bit. But now look, they also have, as far as we're aware, they have their hands in everything. Those seven
Sure.
companies.
Yeah.
So the fact that they would actually go down is also very very low, I guess, if you want to argue that point. And
Sure.
your hope is they don't all seven don't tank at the same time,
Right.
right?
Right.
Your hope is that maybe one of them tanks and another one takes its place. Then you're okay, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're quote unquote betting on, right?
But right now, the Magnificent Seven are all tech stocks, if I remember correctly. And
Exactly,
everyone's on the
exactly,
AI hype train. I mean, AI is
exactly.
amazing. I mean, but
Yeah,
at the same time, there's a grounded level of AI, and then there's the hyped up bonkers AI that may or may not exist, right? And no one really
that's
knows right
true.
now because it's a new space that's
Yep,
basically evolving. So
totally
yeah,
right.
that's
Yep, yep.
yeah. I look. I mean, S&P 500 for myself has done well. I mean, full disclosure, I have bought S&P 500
Yep, same
prior,
here. Yep,
and I remember during COVID when all the stocks had a massive dip. If you remember,
yep.
um, S&P 500 for sure. I bought some of that. I
Hmm.
bought some tech stocks. I bought minor stocks. And then looking back after 4 years, at least for my own portfolio, the ones that did well were S&P 500. I think was like, I think from what I recall off the top of my head, maybe 43% gains. So that's pretty
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah, it's pretty
good.
good. That's
And
pretty good. Yeah.
then for the mining stock, all the various miners that are around, a lot of them were negative for the longest time. Even when all the regular tech
Yeah.
companies went back to green, they were still
Hmm.
negative. And it took a
Yeah.
very long time until the Bitcoin price kind of refound its place near or closer to all-time highs. That's when they
Hmm.
started to turn back to green.
Right.
But a lot of them were not making money during, or I wouldn't say they're not making money. They just weren't in the green during,
Mhm.
the pandemic period, right? Even in
Yeah.
terms of growth recovery, it was not showing, and some of them
Right.
went under, got bought out or consolidated, whatever.
Yeah.
I also invested in some stuff that was what was it? Spot Bitcoin ETFs, sure. Where we're located, they were available. But again, looking back, I think in terms of performance, that area was had a difference. That area had a difference. I think one of
Yeah.
the bigger ones that I've noticed, because what I used to do was I would buy spot Bitcoin ETFs and just for
Mhm.
fun and buy a bit of each one. But
Yeah.
then during that period, Sailor was talking his talk right on all the podcasts and
Yeah.
stuff, and the way I looked at it was, MicroStrategy looks interesting. I didn't really think of it as an ETF. I simply said, you know what, I kind of see where what he's talking about, right? I listened on multiple podcasts, and my impression
Mhm.
that was that he knows what he's talking about. He has some good points, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of believe in his vision. So I said, you know what,
Mhm.
I'm going to allocate a bit to MicroStrategies. So I ended up
Right.
proportioning it pretty much equally.
Yeah.
It's kind of like similar amounts to the spot ETFs. And
Mhm.
then after, like again, looking back 4 years later, and this is no secret, like MicroStrategy's been Michael Saylor has been broadcasting nonstop because in 2023, Bitcoin got all the way back to all time and broke all time highs, right? So,
Yeah.
or in 2024, I guess, but it climbed back up.
Early 2024. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It
Mhm.
started climbing
Yeah.
back up in 2023, all the way back up into 2024. And so
Yeah.
looking back at MicroStrategy's stock price, it actually did better than the spot ETFs. And Sailor's
Yeah.
not lying. It's no secret. It's out there. Anyone can look at the charts for spot Bitcoin ETFs versus, MSDR. They can even look at
Yeah.
the ones since the introduction of the US spot Bitcoin ETFs also versus MSTR, and they can look for themselves.
Mhm.
Now, whether or not that continues, who knows? No one knows, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Obviously, there's leverage there. Saylor knows what he's doing, and he's it's no secret. He publicly tells every corporation this is what he does, this is what he's doing,
Mhm.
and this level of success he's had. So you can't
Yeah.
fault him. Like he has proven it. Now, here's the thing: it's only been 4 years. Who knows what's going to happen in another four, right?
Yeah.
So I would suspect that if and, MicroStrategy is able to continue this type of momentum, and they seem to be doing so. If they can
Mhm.
continue for the next 4 years, you can only imagine what's going to happen the next four and the next
Oh yeah.
four, right?
He's definitely leading the way in terms of making this plan of his
Mm-hmm.
work, right?
Yeah.
And that that means a lot because he's like the first mover in this situation.
Yeah.
He's
Corporate.
he's pioneering a new way of running things,
Yes.
and that's kind of what you look forward to for things like back then when Apple,
Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs.
was like who's at the helm, right?
Right.
And for this is if he stays true to his course, and I do believe what he sounds like he's doing is what he's planning to do. He hasn't faltered from that path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He should be very successful in doing what by executing it. That's
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
He's already have a plan. Plan is fully disclosed. If he
Yes.
doesn't follow it, then he has the right to fail because he has basically told people a lie, right? And if he
Exactly.
follows it, it's very hard to see it not succeed, right? Because
Exactly.
he's having success already right now with it.
Mhm.
Unless one of two things maybe happens, like if Bitcoin for whatever reason does fail, then yes, right? Or
Sure.
maybe he unfortunately can't be at the helm anymore.
Sure.
Then that could also cause
Mhm.
change in direction. And of course, then it's not his plan that failed. It was the fact that someone came in and had to take the reins and had
Sure.
to change course or whatnot, and
Right.
then it led to it, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess a good part to
Sounds good.
uh,
Stop it here.
we can continue another time, but
Sounds good.
the good point is to end the podcast. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Good stuff. Thank you.